Namaskar. Well, friends, let me extend a warm welcome to you to Bhim Bhashya, my audio video podcast series on Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. This audio video podcast series contains 54 short speeches of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, unraveling as many as 25 different dimensions of this multifaceted genius. Friends, this podcast series is focused on Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, on his thoughts, on his work, actions, his philosophy, and above all, the grand vision that he had for India as a nation. This is what this podcast series is all about. Friends, if you like this audio visual podcast series, like it, share it, and subscribe it. So let's move on to the 6th episode of Bhim Bhashya. In this episode 6, the focus is on Dr. Ambedkar's masterpiece in monetary economics, truly his crowning glory in economics. The title of this book is The Problem of Rupee, Its Origin and Its Solution. This book is actually based on Doctor of Science dissertation that was written and presented by Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar to the London School of Economics. It was published in December 1923 after he got his highest degree of Doctor of Science in Economics from London School of Economics in November 1923. As a matter of fact, this year is the centenary year for this magnum opus of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, The Problem of Rupee, Its Origin and Its Solution. This great book was reprinted by Dr. Ambedkar in the year 1947. Actually, he wanted to produce a 2-volume book titled History of Indian Currency and Banking, of which The Problem of Rupee would form the volume 1 covering the period 1800 to the year 1921, and volume 2 was expected to cover the period from 1921 onwards. The volume 1 was published in 1947. Regrettably, however, Dr. Ambedkar, in the middle of all his mass movements, he could not find time to complete the volume 2. Before we go into the details, let me honestly confess that this is an exceedingly complex book, extremely difficult for layman to understand. Even advanced students of economics and even teachers of economics find it hard to comprehend in entirety the greatness of this book. So please bear with me for oversimplification for everybody to understand. Because dazzling the lay readers with complicated details, in my view, is not going to get us anywhere. So what I propose to do, therefore, is to give you essence of this book in as simple words as possible. This book essentially is divided into 2 parts. Part 1 of this book, Dr. Ambedkar is focused on the history of Indian currency and banking during the period 1800 to 1921. That is the focus of the first part. In the second part, in part 2, Dr. Ambedkar addresses most important policy question at that time. The question was, what is the ideal form of currency system for a developing country like India? This was the basic issue, and We are going to discuss both. Let us go ahead with these two parts in the same order. In part 1, Dr. Ambedkar presents an excellent exposition of the evolution of Indian rupee over a period of time. This evolution is analyzed in terms of its form as a medium of exchange and its equivalence in terms of precious metals like gold and silver. According to Dr. Ambedkar, since the time of Akbar, who was the founder of the economic system of Mughal Empire, money in India consisted primarily of gold and silver, the gold moher and silver rupee. Both had fixed ratio with a currency called dam. That dam was copper currency of the Mughal Empire. In South India, the Hindu kings emphasized gold coins. The coin called pagoda was the medium of exchange and standard of value in almost entire South India. After disintegration of the Mughal Empire, there was a general scramble for independence, to have their own currencies. All kingdoms wanted their own currency. The right of coinage was wantonly abused during that period. And there were all sorts of coins presenting a bewildering variety of media of exchange. Beginning with 1806, the East India Company started favoring silver standard, which was a rupee coin of weighing 180 grams, of which 165 grams were pure silver. By 1833, the uniformity of coinage was established by the British in India. Currency Act of 1835, the British government introduced a paper currency to supplement the existing silver standard. Dr. Ambedkar presents a critical review of all these developments and their adverse impact on the stability of the currency standard. Dr. Ambedkar also thoroughly analyzed and presented a critical review of all the proposals for reform of the Indian currency system. Dr. Ambedkar forcefully argued that when all important countries in the world were moving on to gold standard, it would have been appropriate to abandon the silver standard in India in favor of the gold standard. According to him, and I quote, "By an unkind turn of events, the currency system adopted was the so-called gold exchange standard," unquote. Dr. Ambedkar then goes on to provide an insightful discussion of the relative merits and demerits of the gold standard vis-a-vis gold exchange standard. Let us first understand the basic difference, in a very simple terms, basic difference between gold standard and gold exchange standard. Pure gold standard comprises use of gold coins as a medium of exchange. In contrast, the gold exchange standard, the medium of exchange is only paper money. So gold standard, only gold coins are used as a medium of exchange, whereas in gold exchange standard, paper currency is the only medium of exchange, which is kept exchangeable in gold at fixed rates. So in gold standard, only gold coins are used, whereas in gold exchange standard, paper currency is used as a common currency and that is kept convertible into gold at a fixed rate announced by the government. In the controversy regarding the relative effectiveness of gold standard and gold exchange standard, Dr. Ambedkar had to cross swords with John Maynard Keynes, who was probably the greatest economist, greatest macroeconomist of that century. Keynes wrote a treatise in 1909 when he had come to India. It was titled Indian Currency and Finance. There he had criticized gold standard and recommended gold exchange standard as the ideal form of currency system for India. When Keynes came down to support gold exchange standard as the most appropriate currency system in India, no wonder every Tom, Dick and Harry, every economist in our country, they supported the gold exchange standard. But there was one honorable exception, young, bright Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar vehemently criticized Keynes and his other supporters of gold exchange standard. And he forcefully argued that Indian currency system needs gold standard but in a modified form. Not the standard gold standard, but a modified gold standard was recommended by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. When he compared the merits and demerits of gold standard vis-a-vis gold exchange standard, Keynes had argued that gold standard was a hard standard. It was inflexible standard. In fact, it ties the mankind to the wheel of nature. Why? Simply because Keynes had argued that in gold standard, the amount of currency that would be available in the economy would depend on the amount of gold stock that is there in the country, which can increase or decrease by a very small amount. Whereas, Keynes argued, gold exchange standard allows an escape from this frigidity. Therefore, he said that gold standard is more suitable, more appropriate for developing country like India because it has this great quality of flexibility. Dr. Ambedkar's counter argument was simply this. He said that flexibility is a two-edged weapon, double-sided weapon. It is good as well as it's bad. Under the gold exchange standard, the additions to the currency are dependent entirely on the will of issuer of the currency, may it be Reserve Bank of India or may it be the government of India. And therefore, it can be misused by irresponsible government. Let me go back to this argument and elaborate a little further. What Dr. Ambedkar was saying is that I agree with Keynes that there is a flexibility in the gold exchange standard because the amount of currency can be increased or decreased. This flexibility, he argued, was a double-edged weapon. It can be good or it can be bad. It can be good because it does not put undue restrictions on the government for creation of currency. Whereas it can be very bad because if the government or the Reserve Bank of India is irresponsible, then they can go on printing money and that would create a situation of too much money chasing too few goods. An inevitable result would be inflation. And high inflation is nothing but, and it is iniquitous in the sense that it hurts the poor the most. And therefore, he said flexibility by itself is not a virtue, and therefore Dr. Ambedkar recommended a modified form of gold standard rather than gold exchange standard. According to Dr. Ambedkar, under the gold standard, additions to the supply of currency by definition are very small, and therefore stability of the currency standard is not compromised. Dr. Ambedkar provided detailed statistical evidence which showed that prices varied much less under the gold standard than under gold exchange standard. And therefore, he argued that it is the gold standard that is more stable standard vis-a-vis the gold exchange standard. In gold exchange standard, since the prices can be very high, it would compromise the stability, underlying stability of the currency standard. That is why Dr. Ambedkar emphatically argued, and this is truly a critical point, he said that there must be some regulator, by which the discretion that is left to the issuer of currency is regulated. Please let me repeat this. Dr. Ambedkar emphatically said that there must be some regulator under the gold exchange standard. If that is accepted, then there has to be some regulator by which the discretion which is left to the issuer of currency, may it be Government of India or Reserve Bank of India, that must be regulated. Unregulated currency expansion would be highly undesirable. So what is the alternative that Dr. Ambedkar proposed? He proposed a modified form of gold standard, and it had following features. First, a suitable gold coin be minted. Two, rupee as well as gold coin should be unlimited legal tender. Gold and currency rupee would be there parallel. And third, the ratio between gold coin and the rupee must be fixed by law. However, this is the most important point, however, they should not be mutually convertible. Fourth, the issue of currency must be regulated. This would lead to stable prices and therefore secure a currency standard that is stable. Well, friends, this is the sum and substance of Dr. Ambedkar's magnum opus, The Problem of Rupee, which remains to this day the most distinctive contribution made to the arena of monetary economics. Friends, let's conclude this session here. When we meet next time, I'm going to talk about a somewhat delicate subject, somewhat controversial subject, and that is Dr. Ambedkar and the Reserve Bank of India. So long until we meet again real soon. But before I go, let me remind you, let me reiterate that if you like this audio visual podcast series, please like it, share it, and subscribe it. So long until we meet again real soon. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.